Good afternoon. My name is Chris Bishop. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Benzol Group. And today we have the honor to have a special guest with us, Chief Bryant, locally born and bred here in Oklahoma City. He's the local fire chief for Oklahoma City, as well as on the advisory board for the NFFF, which is the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. Thank you, Chief Bryant, for joining us. We're glad you're here. Thank you all for signing up for the webinar. Today we'll be talking about Tier 2s and more in particular finding out and trying to dig into how that impacts and relates to you and your, I guess, to your business and the people that you work with. So again,
Great.
Thank you for joining us.
It was good to be here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Like I said, today we're going to be talking about Tier 2s and talking with Chief Bryant in particular regarding what and how that impacts the fire community, first responders, and honestly the local community in general. So why not let you go and start talking for us here, Chief Bryant, just a little bit about National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, really what that is for those who are not familiar with it.
Well, thanks. And again, I appreciate this opportunity, not only to be discussing this topic with you today, but to express my thanks to the Benzol Group for their support of the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. As you can see, the foundation was created by Congress, and its primary mission is to honor firefighters and emergency responders across the country who are killed in the line of duty. Currently and probably on average, we lose about 100 firefighters or so nationally every year to various causes and various reasons related to their work. And in some cases, depending on the department, that whether it be maybe a small volunteer department, or really any department for that matter, the biggest part of the foundation is we want to work with that department, with that community, to make sure that we properly honor those firefighters and recognize their sacrifice. So a lot of our programs, our fundraising that we do is geared toward making sure that we have the resources to help out in those times, because not only is that a tragic incident, but you really need to start the healing process. And again, I think doing a fitting memorial to these people is part of the start of that healing process. And so we're based out of Maryland. The memorial itself is in Emmitsburg, Maryland. Every year in October, we have our annual memorial ceremony where we bring in the families and some of the co-workers of those that have died in the line of duty, and again, do our best to make that a fitting tribute to their fallen firefighter and enshrine that firefighter's name in that memorial.
Well, thank you, Chief Bryant. That's a great introduction and gives us a really good recap of what National Fallen Firefighters Foundation is, what they do, and really the main reason for wanting to support them. I know at Benzol Group, we really have gotten behind this and really think it is it's a great way for us to show our support to you guys and to the community as a whole. So we really appreciate that, really do. One thing I know that's near and dear to our hearts and to the oil and gas community as a whole is Tier 2 reports. I mean, on one hand, yes, they are something that's kind of a necessary evil, but I think there's more to it. There really is a reason and an importance to that. So you'll see the overview today is we've got to talk about what a report is. I know most people know, but just be good to go back and just kind of revisit that for a second. The history of where that came from, how you file them, and then really get into the meat of the talk, which is the necessity of having them. Right. I mean, far beyond just being told you've got to do it, there really is a true thing that's near and dear to our hearts and to yours about getting these in place and why having them in place. And then with that, obviously, money saving matters, especially considering where oil prices are. There's ways to work with this Tier 2 reporting process and still make it streamlined and less expensive to get it done and provide you guys what you need at the other end of that. So what is a Tier 2 report? Most of you know, but just for completeness sake, I'll go ahead and go over it just briefly. Any organization or business in the U.S. where hazardous chemicals above a certain quantity are required to file those as a Tier 2 report. The reason they do that is so that these reports get updated and turned in annually, so that you as a first responder or any kind of emergency planning committee or response commissions in the area have a chance to really see what is out there and what they might be having to go deal with at any particular time. So those Tier 2 reports are such an important part of that planning process, and then also that response when it has to happen. We never want to have to worry about responding, but unfortunately those incidents occur, and Tier 2 reports help us to get safely there and safely home. Who must comply? Again, like I said, it really comes down to the owner and operator who has on-site storage of hazardous chemicals. But what does it mean, hazardous chemicals? Well, OSHA defines that for us clearly. And we can basically say that any facility where you have to maintain a safety data sheet or an SDS could really basically fall into OSHA's hazardous communication standard. There are some exclusions to that list, and those exclusions are clearly outlined in the Superfund Title III, Section 311, Part E. So let's talk a little bit about the history about where Tier 2 reporting came from, the unfortunate reality of really bringing it to the public eye, and in some respects really worldwide, bringing that presence, that reality that we live with chemicals, and we have to deal with chemicals, but we need to do it safely.
Correct.
So here's a little history. Union Carbide disaster in India. Anybody knows anything about some of the catastrophic events due to chemicals? This one just hits the radar right off the bat. You're talking about something that happened back 1984, where over 3,000, almost 4,000 people were killed. And then you think about the fact, not only just the deaths, but there's thousands of more injured from that unfortunate incident. We move forward to a year later, the EPA says, you know, we really need to do something about that in the US. So they put in place a voluntary program, CEPP, which really is, in a nutshell, the EPA wanted to say, okay, let's deal with air emissions, volatile, unfortunate release of some kind of chemicals into the air. And they rolled it out basically as a voluntary program. What they found was that while a lot of people did respond and jump behind this program, they needed something that had a little bit more structure to it, maybe even some teeth to it if it needed to be. And there came about Superfund's Title III, Sections 311 and 312. In that, really started to set the stage and lay out what Tier 2 reporting was and how it needed to be carried out and what needed to be reported in there. So there was no confusion. Instead of just being voluntary to say, yeah, this is, or no, this isn't, in that Superfund Title III and in those sections, you really have it clear cut. This is what we need and this is how we need it, okay? All overall, I'd say is going well and good. We come fast forward to 2013, not really that long ago when you think about it, and we have this catastrophic, just, I don't know what a better word to say, catastrophic event that happens not really that far away. And that's a point where I think you could really jump in and tell us a little bit more. I mean, we do know from just the history side, that here's this event where there was, the records were there, at least what they thought were good, accurate records were there. Everything was just going to be responded to by this small fire. Go take care of this fire, come home. And at the end of the day, we wind up with 15 killed, 226 wounded, an explosion that registered at least at a 2.1 magnitude by the USGS. What and how can something go so wrong so quickly when we have this in place?
Well, I mean, my comment about that is that obviously it was a huge tragedy, and especially for a small rural community as West Texas was. These gentlemen were volunteers. They had other jobs, they had families, and again, their sense of community, their pride in their community led them to do this work for their community as volunteer firefighters. They obviously were very well of this plant. Its existence had been there for many, many years. I'm quite sure that they probably had a very good idea, generally speaking, of what materials, what they did at this plant, what they processed. But in terms of specific information that would give a firefighter, be it a paid firefighter or a volunteer firefighter, more detailed information in terms of information that you would use in your decision-making process of how you respond to such a facility, depending on what the circumstances you encountered were, might have made a difference. Again, sometimes because of the nature of the material involved, because of the extent of a fire or other type of spill or whatever, you have to think in terms more of protecting the community instead of dealing with this specific problem itself. In other words, had they had maybe better information about how to better respond to this, they might have started evacuation in the immediate area instead of attacking the fire itself. That may have been the better decision. I hate to second guess anybody. I wasn't there at the time, obviously, but this is the kind of information, if we have that, it's available. If we've been able to look at that on a regular basis, then sometimes you can make those decisions more quickly and do more protection for the community and the firefighters that are responding.
I mean, obviously, I wasn't there either, but I think you bring up a good point. I mean, they knew that there was like the anhydrous ammonia there, but there are other things that they didn't really plan for them to be there, or didn't understand. And that does bring up a good question about it. It's a community's responsibility and privilege to keep each other safe. So I think, it's the tier 2 kind of goes beyond just reporting, but something we were talking about off camera before it started was what a great job oil and gas has done to keep you guys informed, and maybe even go, I'd say, way above and beyond tier 2 reporting. Could you tell us a little bit about that, about the pipelines and so forth that they've let you know about?
Well, here locally in the Oklahoma City area and really across the state of Oklahoma, because the gas and oil industry is such a big part of our community and our state, they've done a really good job over the past several years of reaching out to the first responder community, be it fire, law enforcement, emergency medical, to make sure that we know where their facilities are, what kind of processes are going on in those facilities, maps of their pipeline routes. So we have as much detailed information as we can, and they work with us on a regular basis, not just handing that information over to us, but actually meeting with them. And to me, that's an important aspect of tier 2 reporting. It allows for the relationship to develop between what we do and the oil and gas industry, or any industry for that matter, that it keeps us in regular contact. And again, I think that's worked well here. I know that in some places it might not work as well.
Right. That's a good point, though. I mean, we think about sometimes that these reports are just that, they're just reports, and you file them, check it off the list, I did my civic duty. But that's a good point, though. It really opens up that conversation, or helps people remember. Oh yeah, or maybe even puts in people's mind, because somewhere along the line somebody says, why don't we take those reports and sit down with the fire department or the police department or paramedics and whoever, and build these emergency response committees and teams and talk and be the experts from the oil and gas side, whereas we have the experts from the first responder side, and they come together and put their heads together and come up with the best plan possible versus this group doing it here or this group doing it there. I think that's such a great point you make, so thank you.
Well, aside from the actual information itself, when we respond to any type of facility, it's good to know that whoever is there on behalf of that facility, we know who they are.
Oh, good point.
We know what their level of knowledge is. We know what their level of expertise is, and we use that. We don't disregard it. We don't ignore it and get out of the way. We're here. We'll solve the problem.
Right.
That is that, and especially when we're dealing with these types of materials.
Very true.
That is so important to us to, again, have familiarity with that person or that group of people that's managing that facility to help us and give us that information beyond what we see on the written paper.
Thank you so much. Very good point. Okay. Let's continue with our slideshow here. So, Tier 2 filing. What is involved in Tier 2 filing? Really comes down to 3 key dates. You have November 1st. Obviously, that's when the filing software for this new year comes out. Then January 1st, that filing season actually begins. And then everything has to be in, wrapped up, packaged, and delivered by March 1st. So kind of a tight window there, really, when you're talking about January 1st to March 1st. So you really need somebody that knows what to do, how to get it done correctly, to package it and deliver it to those first responders in state and local communities. Even though it's regulated by the federal government, that's the point that really needs to be driven home, because the process from a bird's eye view is really rather simple. You've got 3 steps to it. You've got your data collection, your accumulation or aggregation of that data, and then the auditing of the data. That's kind of step 1, dealing with the data. Then you generate your report. After generating your report, you would just file a report. Seems real simple, and in some ways it is. And then again, it isn't, because while it's regulated at the federal level as far as oversight, at the end of the day, they give that ability and power to each state to say, we want to execute on this however we feel best for our state and within those local communities. And I think that's smart in some regards, because every area is not cookie cutter like every other area. So giving that at a lower level versus just being federally mandated and then ran, it's federally mandated and then pushed down to the states to enforce it how they feel best. Obviously, responding, I would imagine, as a firefighter somewhere in the Rockies might be very different than responding somewhere out in West Texas versus in the panhandle of Oklahoma. Very, very different. So each state requires, their own way of doing things. They may actually prefer to use their own systems, and they may require additional documentation or data points. So what is required at a minimum inside those reports? Obviously, the company information, the facility information, owner and operator with obviously the emergency contacts, the chemicals on location, within certain what the thresholds are laid out, the certificate of accuracy for that, and then the SDSs, depending on which states require that. Again, every state doesn't require SDS, even though that would probably be a good idea to have them in there, but some states don't necessarily require them at this point, and others do. So that's one of those examples of differences between Tier 2s of one state and another. Did you know that the most common chemicals on location at a oil and gas location would be crude oil and water and natural gas? Of course you did. I mean, come on, that's common sense. Really the question that's hidden in that is, did you file for them? So that somebody who may not be as knowledgeable as you is aware of that. Like Chief Bryant said a few minutes ago, they really rely on you, on the people filing these Tier 2 reports and those emergency contacts as the experts, and they can identify you right away without having to ask. They can go right to you and say, thank you so much for those Tier 2 reports. Thank you for being a part of that emergency contact community and planning communities. And part of those processes, what do we need to do right now to make sure we get this solved for you and keep our people safe as well? Anything you want to add to that, Chief Bryant?
Well, I kind of go back to your point a little bit about the process itself. In my line of work, I'm no different. There's a certain amount of reporting that I'm required to do by law, either state or federal law. So I understand when you're filling these things out that sometimes our thought is this is bureaucratic red tape. This goes somewhere where it'll never be looked at, never be utilized, and so forth. I understand that, but I can't stress enough, this is not one of those things. Again, here locally, we have a LEPC, or a local emergency planning committee. It's not just the fire service that's involved with that, but county government, city government, local emergency management. So it gets everybody together. These are reviewed, they're looked at. Again, it connects us up to the state level, obviously, with the Department of Environmental Quality. So in other words, we sit down, look at these things, and hopefully, as the saying goes, we're all on the same sheet of music going forward.
I appreciate that. That's a good point. It's good to hear from somebody who's actually involved in this, and not just somebody on the reporting side, but somebody who actually uses those reports and involved in those planning committees to validate that point. You know, it's easy to say, yeah, we need to do that. But when you're actually sitting next to somebody or listening to somebody tell you, no, it's not just a report. I mean, it really is something that's a useful, set of information, and we do really use it. So it's good to hear, and it's encouraging to know that it isn't just filed away and put away for whatever point.
Right. And the process is only as good as the people involved. And again, I'm happy with the way things are here in Oklahoma City. I know that may not be the case in every place across the country, but I think if everybody does their part, and again, use this as a way of communicating and bringing everyone's awareness up a level, then it's beneficial for everyone.
Great, thank you. So what chemicals are excluded? Here's basically an overview of that. Substances that are regulated by the FDA. Solids in any kind of manufactured item where you really won't get exposure into normal use. Substances in a concentration or form equal to or less than what you'd see in a general public use. Substances that are used in research or laboratory or medical settings, obviously they'd have to be under the supervision of qualified personnel. And substances used in routine agricultural operations. Okay, those are things that are excluded, and you can find those exclusions or more detail on that. And again, the Superfund 3, Section 311, Part E. So one information is critical. Above everything else, accuracy, accuracy, accuracy. I mean, when you're really looking at that, you want to have an accurate location of the facility. You want to have accurate contact information. And you want to definitely have accuracy on the chemical inventory. Again, coming back to the fertilizer explosion, I mean, if we'd had the correct information, it's always easy to look back in hindsight in 2020 and say, what if? But sometimes that's all we've got to go off of and assume that with the accurate information, maybe things would have been different. We certainly could have hoped so.
I couldn't agree more. Again, I think when you think you have a familiarity with a plant or a processing facility in your community, and don't have that regular contact, don't keep up with what's going on there, that if something else happens, as it was in the case in West, it wasn't so much the main chemical that I think they thought they were dealing with, anhydrous ammonia. You bring something else into that, and containers get compromised. You start mixing those things. They come together either from an industrial accident, fire, what have you. Then things change dramatically very quickly. And so without that accurate information, those are the things that will sneak up on you.
Yeah, definitely. So talking about that, I want to pull the slide up here for a minute and just let them see that. And then we'll give her a brief pause and we'll go back to the camera and let you talk about just face-to-face with the audience there, just a little bit more about basically the process of how you really use this Tier 2, some stuff maybe about the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. And there's this slide also for people to see. and then we have that one as well. So let's start with this one. I'll let you just talk to this one. We'll go to the next one, talk about the next one. We'll go to the camera, and you can have that face-to-face.
Okay. Well, as I said earlier, our main mission is to honor fallen firefighters. Apart from that, and you see the statistics there. So again, it happens with way more regularity than any of us would like. But going beyond the main mission of the foundation to honor these people, a big part of what we do, and a lot of our programs are centered on prevention. So when we have partners like the Benzol Group that come in and support us, that's what we think that the importance that they bring to that partnership with the NFFF is that helps us more focus on the preventive things that we can do so we can bring these numbers down. So I think that's why I'm pleased that we have such partners out there in the community and the private sector, so we can emphasize those programs more. Again, hopefully do more on the prevention side.
Yeah, it's just staggering me when I first saw this. One firefighter dies on average in the U.S. every 78 hours. I mean, that's wow.
And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of it is the work itself, and it is so strenuous and labor intensive that heart attacks, cardiovascular accidents are one of the main causes. But again, it's related to that work that they do.
Right. Then obviously this is such an amazing foundation, and to see this, would you like to talk about that briefly?
Sure. Again, these are some examples of some of the programs and some of the services that we provide to the families of the fallen firefighters. The Memorial Weekend support. Again, we cover all the cost, and so the fundraising that we do, our partnerships, and the funding that we get from that is used for these survivors. Again, beyond that, as you see there, conferences, workshops, we don't want to just honor them and say goodbye. So we have ongoing programs to make sure that we're doing things in terms of counseling, how they're dealing with their lives beyond the tragedies that they've experienced, even financial planning, as you see there. So we just want to be there for them going forward. Really, and there's no time frame on that. So when they reach out and they need help, we're there for them.
Well, we appreciate that, and what an amazing organization. And that's why we wanted to partner with you and join in that cause to help make sure that we can do our part to help these families that have been impacted by such a tragic event in their lives. Now, I'd like to switch back over to the camera and talk to you about, okay, we talked about Tier 2 reports. How does that really get implemented from your standpoint? When you get the call, where does the Tier 2 fall into place? How do you pull it up? I mean, what's that process?
Well, I think it happens in a variety of ways depending on the community that you're talking about. Here in our case, again, we sit down with the LEPC, we go over those, and we make decisions on where this information needs to be stored. In our case, we work off of what we refer to as a CAD system, or computer-aided dispatch. We have mobile data computers on all of our fire apparatus, which are obviously used to relay all types of information, the location and the type of response that our firefighters are going to. And so in this event, we can actually load information, the vital information from these Tier 2 reports, into our CAD system. So when that address comes in, through 911 and we're responding to it, we automatically get the information for that occupancy that we can obviously send to the firefighters right there in the cab of their apparatus. They can start making decisions and start sizing up that situation before they ever arrive.
That's good. So you don't have to wait till you're there and then see it. You can start thinking about what you want to do beforehand.
Our hazardous materials response unit, they actually have their own computers kind of in the back toward the apparatus, so the officer will be riding back there. He can be looking these things up on their program back there, so they know, again, and they can, they're not always, the hazmat unit's not always on the scene first, so they can radio to maybe some of the first arriving fire apparatus what they can expect and what they need to be prepared for.
Okay, well, that's very interesting. Very interesting. I did not know that you have the computers on the trucks right there and pull up that information. I mean, that seems kind of common sense. And I think about it, that now the computers that we have everywhere, but just not something you think about.
But I mean, and even some communities that may not have that type of technology, this kind of information now can be, again, sent to iPads.
Sure.
And so, again, in maybe a smaller community that doesn't have a CAD system or something similar to what we have, that information can still be transmitted and communicated in various ways. And with the technology that exists today, again, that puts that information in that responder's hand before they ever get there.
And that's a nice point, because, at Benzol Group, we've always leveraged that IT. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things we do, like with our Tier 2 reports, is we do them for our clients. We house that information electronically. So if there's ever a need to pull up that information, we've got it.
Right.
So our clients can log into our system or call us, and we can get that information to them quickly because it's all cataloged and it's right there ready for them in our system. So it's amazing with the technology nowadays how portable that is to move between computer to computer or to an iPad, because our inspectors go out there. Right. They take their iPads and they do their work and they get all this information, and we help in that process to make that Tier 2 happen. And I guess the other side is true too, that once that information is gathered and packaged, it goes out the same way to a computer or to an iPad. It can be there. Which
to me also stresses the importance of going through the process and making regular updates, because obviously things change. Processes and storage of quantities and so forth change throughout a year's time.
Yeah.
And so again, it's always good to update that, and with the technology out there, it's gotten more easier, I can tell you that.
Definitely, and that's the thing I think is a good point to make too, because with our system, I know we have that capability with everything being stored there, that if they do have a change, they can look and see, what did we file in our Tier 2, not having to go down the hall or call for it out of a filing cabinet, or even going to the to where they filed it. But they can come to us and say, we've got this change, and we are always on top of making sure that we know all the people that need the information in a municipality, and the people in the state, and the various regulations about what they need. And it's all pretty much turnkey in a lot of ways, and we keep all that up to date. Because you never know. You're right.
Well, and I think that's a good point that you make, is that, I would highly recommend working with a company such as the Benzol Group that does this type of work. Again, they can simplify the process and, again, make sure that information is delivered exactly where it needs to be.
I mean, at the end of the day, of course, we want to do above everything else, help make people's lives better. Because, yes, do we charge for doing a Tier 2? Of course we do. But we give some of those profits away, like to the NFFF, because we want to put our money where our mouth is. We want to be a good steward, and we want to be a good community partner. So this is one of the ways we do that. We help provide a way to make sure that information is accurate, provide a way to make sure the information can get delivered in a timely fashion, and to help share those results and that money with people that need it most, which would be families that have been impacted by these tragic events. So anything else you'd like to add before we move on?
I don't think so. I think we covered that pretty good.
All right, great. Okay, well, in addition to that, obviously, not filing is never a good thing. For instance, failing to file comes with penalties. The EPA alone can administer civil and administrative penalties in the range of $20,000 per facility. Forget the fact that above that, individual citizens have the right to initiate civil actions against anybody that is clearly out of compliance and decided not to file Tier 2s, whether that be a firefighter's family or somebody down the street. I mean, these people's lives are at risk, and somebody to just be negligent outright, that's not right. So they put into place the ability to make that right. In addition to that, the state and local actions can occur, be those emergency response committees or emergency planning committees, or any other local municipality or state government that's involved in that and covered under that umbrella of planning these things has a right to go and file against you for just being outright negligent. you know, but that's one of the things. I don't want it to be a scare tactic. I just wanted the reality to be there, that there's some serious penalties beyond. I mean, obviously the most important is the fact that people could die from this, from not taking it seriously. But there's also the monetary impact for companies that just choose to look the other way and not file. I mean, so it's an easy process. It's a little bit of a process that it has to be understood by an expert. That's why we offer our services, to do it efficiently and easy and turnkey for you. And we want to make sure it's right. And, you know, I can't think of a better way than letting somebody who's on top of it and know what's going on to take care of that, so that we make sure the people like the firefighters got the right information and are protected. So, for instance, saving money. So it costs you to file, but you can save money in that process by not procrastinating or avoiding it. You can miss out on the expense of having to wait or getting penalties levied against you. You can miss out on the stress of waiting to the last minute, and you can miss out on being responsible for hurting or even killing somebody. So it really does make the difference in a lot of cases between life and death when you're dealing with if you're going to file and when and how long you wait to file. Because filing accurately, again, like I said, it's about accuracy, accuracy, accuracy. In addition to that, making sure that you've got somebody that understands how that process works. There's a lot to that three-step process, and it varies from state to state. Each state can request different things. They may have different processes. We want to, at Benzol Group, assist you in that process, and we can do that very well for you. In fact, we can use your last year's report and cut you some of the costs on the administrative side for us by using last year's report, looking at any updates you may have, and getting it filed where it needs to be filed. Because it may not just need to be filed with the state. It's going to have to make sure it's filed down to all of those organizations that have a stake in seeing that information, like your local fire department. If you're in multiple states, which a lot of oil and gas companies are, having somebody that can process that information and get it out to multiple states, understanding the differences, processing that in a turnkey environment, having checks and balances in place that make sure that the documents that need to be in one state are there, and the ones that are not needed in another state don't have to worry about getting those there, and that everything that everybody needs and requires gets to them on time and in the fashion and form that they need it best. So, a few questions that I'm going to pose and answer for you, and then we'll open up and let Chief Bryant, I have a few other ones for him, and then any questions that GAs may have as well. So, can I avoid a site visit when preparing Tier 2s? Yes, you can. By giving us that information, he saves you the costly trip of having somebody go out there and look. We can take that information, we can get it together, and we can get that taken care of and filed for you with Tier 2s. If you have other services need to be done, like an SPCC, why not let us gather the information for your Tier 2s while we're out there? That way you don't have to pay somebody to do that. You're already paying for us to be on location. We already have the information. We'll do both for you. So those are just some easy cost-saving measures we can lay on the table for you to consider. In addition to that, if we have last year's report and you can get that to us, either in a zip or T2S file, we can use that. We have most of the work done. Any minor additions or changes that might need to be made, we can make them, and we can file those for you. Again, taking those and comparing them to any kind of changes or requirements that would be at a state level. Because, again, everything is not static, and the state may change their requirements for how their state is wanting this information, even if at the federal level there's been no change. So, my point to all that is you really want to have an expert. Now, I know there's other companies that do it, and I understand and can appreciate that, and I cannot speak to them. But I can speak to the fact that Benzol Group has done it right, and will continue to do it right because it is important to us and is important to our friends, such as the firefighters, and being a part of that wonderful organization and supporting them, the NFFF, the NFFF, National Fallen Firefighters Fund, and being a part of that to try to help these people get home to their families, and when they don't, to help their families recover from a tragic event that may have been able to be avoided if there had been the right chemical inventory information in place. Again, we can do this through a 5-step process. We have accountability all through our system. We make sure, one of the things you mentioned is going to location, pulling up that location information. One of the things we make sure about is that in our system, we have it nailed down. The aerial photography and the lat and long of where you're going is the place you need to be headed to. Anybody who's gone out to a well knows that it's common practice that the lats and longs typically are for the wellhead. However, the fire may not be at the wellhead, and you may be on the wrong road, which is just delaying getting the fire solved and making and compounding the situation and making it worse. We verify and ensure that that information is correct for what we put on there. If it is really a storage tank, that lat and long is for the storage tank. It is not for the wellhead. We have multiple levels of organization in our system. It is not a one pass, one person sees it. We make sure that through that whole system, our staff at multiple levels look at that, verify that, and make sure it's right, both at the county level, at the state level, at individual field level, and there's no duplication, but the information is accurate and timely. We also make sure that from state to state the information is correct, and if there's any additional information, that information is communicated properly and accurately to each state according to their requirements. And if the state has made changes to their requirements, we know about them because we make sure to stay in communication with each state. The online territory reporting system, which I mentioned earlier, allows us to provide you access as a client to those territory reports at any point. If you need to pull that information up, it is there at your fingertips. Get out your iPad, hook onto the system, there's your reports. So let's say you're on location and Chief Bryant comes to you and he needs some information. Well, you've got your iPad, or he does, and let's say the territory report's not right there in your hands. We've got it on our system. We can pull it up for you. It's right there, and you can have it. And at the end of the day, everybody's made informed decisions. So questions can be directed to myself, Chris Bishop, the Director of Business Development, or to our production manager, Cam Contreras. These are our numbers. This slide deck will be sent out to you. We also want to give time for Chief Bryant to give some talks and to give us some insight. I have a few questions for him, but I would be remiss not to mention that we would love for you to consider giving your time, getting behind the National Fallen Firefighters. There is a link on our landing page to our business because, again, we believe in them and we have no problem with supporting them. So we make that public record. It's on our website. You can click on that and you can donate to them directly, even if you don't use us. Of course, we'd love you to use us, but at the end of the day, if it's going to help them, we feel honored to be a part of that process. Chief Bryant, I have a few questions for you. I'm going to go back to the camera.
Okay.
And then I'll ask you a few questions and open it up to anybody else that would have any questions as well. All right, so one of the questions comes up, and I think it's a good one, is what special concerns do first responders have in particular at an oil and gas facility?
Well, I think our first concerns is, again, if it's an oil and gas facility, and obviously they're very common here in Oklahoma City and across the state, generally speaking, we have a good idea of what we're going to encounter there. The specific things that we need to know are what processes might be involved, because not all of those materials are used in the same way, sure, and they're obviously utilized for different purposes. So again, we want to know quantity. We want to know what processes are involved. Again, Is there any special information? Is there any other types of materials on the scene that we need to be aware of, that mixing that or knowing that those two materials might come together,
Right.
It changes your whole mindset and your approach to some of these incidents.
Yes. You know, one thing it reminds me of from when I had chemistry class, my first chemistry class in college, to make the impact about chemicals. They said, you know, just one square of carpet can release enough cyanide poisoning to kill a whole family.
Right.
I'm like, wow. I mean, you don't think that way, but you know, now you're talking about at an oil and gas facility where you've got huge tanks of these chemicals that unless you understand what could happen with them, could be very very detrimental.
Sure. What's pressurized, what's not pressurized,
Yeah.
all of those considerations have to be thought about to give us the best information that we can have in terms of how we're going to respond to it, how we're going to try and mitigate that problem.
Yeah. Definitely. Another question is, how does a typical 911 call to an oil and gas facility play out? I mean, obviously, somebody's going to call in. I mean, what's your experience with that?
Well, again, on our system, the call goes into the 911 center. Again, depending on what information the actual caller gives the 911 operator, again, that starts the incident. And again, that really, in a sense, starts the decision-making process for us. So the 911 operator will enter that address right then and there. There may be certain information, maybe just the name of the company comes up and gives you some indication of what type of facility it is. So we start processing that information immediately. Obviously, the type of facility, the type of materials that they have on hand determines what level of response that we're going to give. So in other words, whether it might be an odor of a chemical, we might send a smaller response to investigate that. If the report comes in that there's some type of industrial accident, some type of spill, leak, what have you, then we know what type of resources to send out on the initial response, including our hazardous materials response unit.
Okay, good point. How is the oil and gas industry doing in protecting first responders? You mentioned a little bit of that, and I think that was a good insight. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that about what we're doing?
Well, especially here, and again, I think nationally you can make a case that it's improved as far as what's going on out there, not only from a technology standpoint in putting better systems in place to contain certain materials, not as prone to accidents, and especially here in Oklahoma, a little bit storm proof. You know, that's a big consideration that a lot of times during storms, with whatever damage the storm does, we also have to deal with tank batteries, releases of other types of chemicals if a plant gets hit or something of that nature. So, and it's improved not only from that technology standpoint and everything that industry is doing to make their own facilities safer, but again, the information sharing, the relationship building, the more awareness, more communication between the two industries has I think, improved it quite a bit over time.
And obviously that leads into it's helping protect the communities more. So is there anything you'd like to add to that, or you can think of that something that oil and gas industries in general have really done? I mean, those are all very important and wonderful things regarding helping to protect the community. Is there any other things like maybe public service announcements that you see, or anything like that the oil and gas community is really helping with? We'd like to maybe say, we can say thank you to them for that too.
Well, absolutely. I think again, whereas in years past it might have been the thought of some that the less information the better, what people don't know won't hurt them, that type of attitude. Now there is more awareness. Now there is more transparency in the industry, especially maybe at a local level, to make sure people understand. And I think the more knowledge they have, the less apprehensive they are about it, and not as worried about it, and at the same time being very aware of what's in the community that themselves and their families live in.
And that's interesting. I was reading an article earlier today, something is an oil and gas article. They brought up that point. They've done research and found out that actually the fear of the unknown is actually a bigger problem than actually knowing what it is and dealing with that. And it was just an interesting. There's a number of research studies. They all pretty much led to that reality that people knowing about stuff actually made them more okay with, okay, it's been addressed, it's being addressed, and I know about it, then I have no idea what that is over there. So that's interesting.
And to add to that, I think a lot's been done here recently about when there is an accident, that what they communicate to the public, that they don't attempt or they seem to be hiding information or holding back for legal reasons or whatever, I think has improved as well. So in the event that there is an accident, giving people enough information to make decisions about what they want to do around their own homes, and in the event that they may need to take some type of protective measure, whether, you know, shutting all the windows and doors in your house, turning off your AC, or maybe it'd be a good idea to go locate somewhere else for a time.
Okay, we got about 10 minutes, and I wanted to carve out some time there. Personal stories. You got any you want to share with us? We'd love to hear them. So this is your time to say what you want, including if there's something in particular you'd like to share about the National Fallen Firefighters, or just about just your experiences. I mean, you've got years of experience in this area, and again, we appreciate your coming and being a part of this today, and we just want to give you that time. Just this is your time.
Sure. Well, I think, like I say, in my 34 years in the department, I've seen this run the full spectrum of how we deal with these types of situations, from responding to a spill of an unknown liquid on a city street, and our response to that, our action was to take a fire hose and wash it down the storm drain, to now the types of things that we do to make sure that certain materials don't enter the water system, don't get released out into the atmosphere, and so forth. So a lot of improvement over that. That hasn't just been all on the side of emergency response. It's obviously we have to have that cooperation. You know, years ago, well before I became chief of the department, I was a member of our hazardous materials response team, and I've seen the variety there too of how when things did happen, when we were called to respond to certain facilities, it go very well and very not so well. And really, a lot of it had to do with the information that we had going in. Less information we have, the more cautious we're going to be, to the point of being overcautious, which may not be the best thing, but we have to protect our personnel. A lot of it had to do, I would say, with the accuracy of that information as well. And I've seen that, examples of that, good and bad. You know, we show up, we have a contact name and a number, and only to find out that that's old information and inaccurate. And there's precious time being wasted trying to correct that and know who the correct person is to contact. And then, again, the materials itself. You know, that we believe we know what's in a building or a structure, and come to find out that because that business may have changed, that's no longer there. And again, it wastes precious time in going, having to try and find that information out at the time.
Do you think there's been, just in general, in the community of, we'll just say first responders, I'll just say that, more confidence to be able to just execute on a plan than maybe than what I might think would have been in the past, where there might be a little bit of trepidation or fear to step forward? And now it's this is probably right, and I feel much more confident doing this versus it's probably not right.
Well, with the technology that we have in the fire industry, with the resources that we have in terms of specialized equipment to deal with hazardous material situations, we can be a lot more deliberate in our approach to these, and again, less apprehensive in some cases, and be able to go in quickly and mitigate a problem before it becomes a larger problem.
I bet that also helps on a different side. That also probably helps with people who are like first responders, like paramedics and people that are showing up on location, to know these are the chemicals and this is how we need to start treating this person who's been exposed to these chemicals as well. So this tier 2 reports go far beyond just the firefighters. It really goes into all areas of that.
That's a good point. One of the things that's critical in a hazardous material incident is to isolate that material and contain it to as small as area as possible. When some person is contaminated and they have to be treated, the last thing that we want to do is have that material go with that person in an ambulance
Yeah.
to an emergency
Oh.
room and on from there.
Yes.
So again, we have to know what that is, how to deal with it, so we can probably decontaminate that at the scene
Yeah.
and prevent the spread of that to other places and keep that from getting to other people that aren't involved.
That's a good point, because, you know, yeah, we typically think that it's the site that's the problem, but that problem now all of a sudden, if the information wasn't there, wasn't handled correctly, we've now transported some of that problem to multiple places.
Absolutely.
Wow, you know, I hadn't thought about that. Good. Anything else you'd like to share with us? If not, then I don't see any questions at this point other than the ones that we've had beforehand. So I'll give you a chance if there's anything you'd like to say about National Fallen Firefighters. Again, love for people to go out there and donate to you guys, but please tell us anything else.
Well, again, I want to thank everybody for their time today and their participation. This is important work that we do, and again, we couldn't do it without the type of partnerships that we go out there and foster in the private sector. Again, we want to avoid these tragedies. We want to prevent these tragedies. That's a big part of the programs of the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation. But when they do unfortunately occur, again, we want to pay proper honor and tribute and provide services for the survivors of that event. So again, I want to thank everybody for their time and attention on that today. Obviously, if we would like any help that we could get, sure. And the information on today's presentation, I think you have with you. So if you want to contact us, feel free to do that. And if there's anything beyond this that we can answer for you, we'd be happy to do it.
Well, thank you so much. Again, it's, you know, on behalf of Benzol Group, one, I want to tell you that we really do appreciate that organization, and we appreciate what all the first responders do, and want to be a part of that, continue to support that in any way that we can, and really feel honored that you were able to carve out some time for us today.
I enjoyed it.
And come and talk to us, and very informative. I've learned a lot today about that whole process from a completely different angle. So thank you. Again, the National Fallen Firefighters, there's a link on our landing page for Benzol Groups. You go to benzolgroup.com and find us, any information about us and about you know, your organization as well. And just take the time to thank a firefighter today if you see one, or another first responder. I mean, their jobs are tough, and we realize that. And thank the oil and gas community in particular for all they've done to support you guys, to support us in our endeavors as well. So thank you guys. I hope all of you have a great day, and I look forward to talking to you soon.
Take care.